Good morning, good morning. It's Charmaine here, and I'm really excited today to talk about planning your speaking and book tour. This is a topic I get really excited about, and I've done this several times in terms of speaking and book tours, and every single time I do a tour, I learn so much more. I learn what I'll definitely never do again. And of course, I learned things that really worked that I want to be able to replicate over and over again. So welcome to the webinar. You'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, if you see me looking over there, it's because I'm looking at the chat box. I'd love to have you share where you're listening from today, and I don't know, maybe what the weather's like. And I'm in California today, so looking outside, it's sunny, and the palm trees are blowing in the wind, and the ocean just looks really inviting. I know some of my friends and colleagues who are listening and joining us today, they're actually in snow. So my condolences for that on you, for all of you. All right, let's get ready to rock and roll. Some of you haven't met me before. I work in the corporate realm as a speaker and trainer, helping businesses with their communication and conflict resolution. So I teach those skills as well as resilience. But because I'm an author, I have 5 books that are published by 3 different publishers, and then I also am featured in a bunch of other ones. I sort of fell into this whole world of speaking and book tours and sharing with people what I've learned along the way. So I also speak to entrepreneur groups around sponsorship and planning their speaking and book tours and how to market and sell their books. Now, in terms of speaking and book tours, these can actually be a great way to make a movement around your message, to take your message on the road, and it can be a lot of fun. And it can be a lot of work. So I thought what we do today is start off by sharing with you a few secrets, and I guess they're actually more mistakes. They're things that I learned the hard way. And I don't know about any of you listening, but I'm one of these people that when I learn a lesson the hard way, sometimes I have to learn it 2 or 3 more times to make sure I got it. Please let me know I'm not alone. Is there anyone else that learns that way? You learn through the mistakes that you make, and then sometimes you got to fall down a few more times. So you can write that in the chat box. That's how I learned. So here's the 3 mistakes when you're planning a speaking and book tour. Number 1, and I have done this a number of times, is that typically we don't leave ourselves enough time to plan. And I always get asked the question, how much time do you need? Well, that really depends, because I used to think 6 months was lots of time to plan a 1-week tour. But the reality is in that 6-month period, you're also running your speaking business or whatever business it is that you're running. You're out there sharing your magic and genius with the world and planning a tour. And I noticed that 6 months creeps up on you very quickly. The other element that I learned in planning is that we often as entrepreneurs kind of work on our time schedule. So we work when we have high energy. I don't know about any of you, but I get these crazy creative bursts at 10 o'clock at night. When I should be focusing on going to sleep or going to bed, I often get this creative burst of energy that lasts about 90 minutes. And I do some of my best work then. Not a time to be emailing people, especially if they have their notifications on. So I found the first time I did a tour, I started doing all this planning when my energy was high. And I would get things done very quickly, but then I would come in the next day, turn on my computer, and have this massive email box full of all the people who have now responded to me. So you actually have to pace your planning. So mistake number 1 is that often people don't leave enough time to plan. And the other challenge with planning is that as entrepreneurs, I think we often get our information out there very quickly. So we knock things off our to-do list. We cross items off our task organizer. But the people that you're connecting with, the people that are going to be hosting you in the cities that you're visiting, they also have other to-do lists. So it might take you 3, 4, 5 phone calls to get the person on the phone. And that was the big learning for me, that in my head, 6 months sounded like a lot of time to plan. And in reality, we needed 9 months to a year. And now let me tell you, as I share the stories of mistakes I've made and what you want to avoid, the very first tour that I did, the official tour, was called Paws Across Canada. PAWS, pause. That's right. You heard it right. It's based on the stories of my dog Toby and the books that I have about our dog Toby. And we're on a mission at Hammond International to build a kinder planet. And so our mission with Paws Across Canada was to build a kinder planet, one paw, one person at a time. And because I have a couple of books that are for children, they're for children ages 5 to 8, and they're about bully prevention and kindness, we wanted to have our tour also support schools and rescue organizations because our dog Toby is a rescue dog. So one of the things that we did was we started planning for school visits. Now, lo and behold, right in the middle of our tour, very close to the time we were leaving, but what was going to happen right in the middle of our tour was a strike at the schools in the province that we were going to be visiting. And all of the speaking engagements that we had booked were not going to happen because the school was going to be on strike. That's the other thing that you want to consider when you're thinking about how much planning and lead time do you need, is what are the things that can come up. So it's not just about how much planning time do you need, how much lead time do you need, what else is going on in the world around the time that you want to do your tour. Now, here's a quick strategy that you can think about. When you're planning dates for your tour, you might want to consider noteworthy events that happen in that time frame. Here's an example. Because my books that we were featuring on Paws Across Canada were about bully prevention, what I could have done, we didn't, but what I could have done was looked at when are the key dates in the world of bully prevention. So in October, we have National Bully Prevention Day. In February, we have International Kindness Day. What might have served me better for that first tour would have been to wrap the tour around an important day like that, Bully Prevention Day or Kindness Day. It probably would have increased the degree of media support we could have got, and it would be a perfect fit with the audiences that we were trying to reach on our tour. So that was one good learning that came out of a mistake I made, that I didn't leave myself enough time. Now, in terms of the folks that we've got joining us today, I would love to hear the answer to this question. If you are planning a speaking tour, a book tour, a philanthropy tour, whatever that tour is for you, how long do you want that tour to be in terms of days, weeks? What's the time frame? So I'm just going to give you a moment to type that in the chat box. If you're listening to this on the recording later, I'd like you to write that number down on a piece of paper just so it's in your head. So how long would you like your tour to be? I'm going to share responses from a few people that I talked to before the webinar that can't be on live, and I'll share their answers with you as well. Okay, good morning, my friends. So we've got 10 cities in 10 days. I love that, and you know why I love that. 2 weeks, thank you, Rita. Anyone else with us live, you can type in. The two gals I talked to a few weeks ago, one of them is planning on doing just a tour in was it one part? I think it was within one state that she's in. I could be wrong on that, but one state. But she wanted to actually do that over a 3-month period. So that was one answer that we consider. And then the other individual I talked to, he thought it'd be cool to do this power out sort of tour where he would be in one city, but that he would make a number of stops in one city. So it was it was sort of like 1, 10, 100. One city, 10 stops, 100 lives per stop or impacted. So he was kind of doing some cool things with playing with numbers. LOL, yes. So we'll talk about that later. So with your tour, here's mistake number 2. Most people try to book a tour that's too long. I did that. I profess that was one of my biggest mistakes and one of the best learning experience. So it was one of those gifts wrapped in sandpaper, as the saying goes. Now, for the folks that were thinking, oh, I'd love to do a 2-month tour or a 3-month tour, here's why I say to you, please don't do that. Please don't do that. The longer your tour is, the harder it is to get media attention. We learned that. We planned our very last tour that we did was called A Million Acts of Kindness. So we took our Paws Across Canada, supersized it. Instead of going to 3 provinces in Canada, we went across North America, 14,000 kilometers. So for all my US friends, that's about 10,000 miles. And we went city after city. It was amazing. I got to tell you, it was amazing. In a 32-foot sponsored motorhome that we called the Kindness Mobile. It was sponsored by an amazing company in Canada, Fraser Way RV. And so we traveled 14,000 kilometers in 6 weeks across North America. And in my head, when I started planning that tour, I wanted it to be 3 months. And then we just knew with the lead time that I had left to plan that there was no way that we could make it 6 months or 3 months, sorry. And then we backed it down to 6 weeks. And one of the big learnings that we had in our review and learn process was that 6 weeks was even too long. The longer the tour went on, the harder it was to get media attention. And remember, during a tour, you're pushing all kinds of content out about your tour. You're pushing out videos and pictures, video travel blogs. We were doing blogs. We were doing live streaming on Periscope, which is a platform that runs with Twitter. We were doing articles on LinkedIn. We were doing reviews on the places that we stayed. And so there was a lot of social media content that was going out to our audiences. And you imagine after 6 weeks, your audience could get tired. And with the media, what we found is that when we were coming into a community or into a region, and we were there and we were going to do some great activities, some speaking, school presentations, philanthropy work, some kindness activities, and then we left to go on to the next tour or the next stop. When we set it up like that, we had a lot more support from media. So the longer the tour, the tougher it is to get media support. And the other thing you have to be very careful about is not exhausting your audience. If you're using email, for example, to recognize your sponsors, to promote your tour stops, your email list might very quickly start unsubscribing because what they're seeing is just only information about your tour, instead of the other reasons they love you too, the reasons they subscribe to your newsletter or to your opt-in for the very first reason. So we have to be aware of leaving enough time to plan your tour and then doubling it, really. We have to make sure that we pick a tour length that's manageable, so not making your tour too long. That was the other learning for us, is that when you're traveling, it's tiring. You are on all the time. Even though Chris, my husband, did most of the driving, I do have to say I did do 3 hours. Now, some of you are saying, what, Charmaine, you only drove 3 hours in a 6-week period? I just got to share, those motorhomes are very, very large. So I just drove it on this great 3-hour stretch where there were no turns and no traffic. But, we hadn't considered in our planning of the tour that a 32-foot motorhome travels much slower than our Escalade. So we didn't account for adding on 20 to 25% more travel time than we allotted. There were times, folks, that we were kind of cruising into a city in time to get to our event or our commitment. And for me, that just created some unnecessary anxiety or nervousness. So you've also got to plan for that. When we talk about not leaving enough time to plan and making your tour too long, you have to plan for some of these challenges that could happen. The other thing that we didn't plan for is we didn't plan for how long some of the stops would take. So we certainly planned for the events. We knew that the speaking engagement might be an hour, or this book signing was 2 hours, or the community cleanup we were doing in a park would be 3 hours, and then we'd have some time with media. What we didn't plan for is all the meal breaks when you stop to have meals. And we ate a lot of our meals actually in the RV, but when we would stop for gas, stop for meals, we hadn't factored that time into our planning. So there was a lot of learning around that. So those are 2 mistakes. The third mistake, and I think this one might have been the most profound learning for me, absolutely profound, is that do not go to cities unless you have champions there. And I'm saying this with love because there were so many cities that we wanted to go to because we thought we could make a difference there. And the challenge is that if we didn't know people in that community, if we didn't have a champion in that community, if we didn't have a lot of business contacts in that community, it was an incredibly high degree of work to promote the events because we were promoting in a community where we didn't have relationships and where we weren't known. And so it was sort of feeling like a very uphill climb. Make sure that the cities that you choose, the stops that you choose to make on your tour route are all ones where you have champions or you're prepared to find champions, because it will be your champions that totally help you make that a success. So I've got a couple of questions coming on the chat board, and I will answer that in 1 minute. I just want to talk about the champions for a minute. Here's a really good tip that we learned. It worked for us on every single tour. And it's how we built strong champions. So you want to write this down. As soon as you pick a community or a stop that you want to make, a city you want to stop at, the first call you make is actually to the tourism department. I kind of fell onto this. It was the tourism department I called because I was actually looking for places where we could camp with an RV. Because in the small community we're traveling to, I didn't see any campgrounds listed when I was Googling. So I phoned the municipal government, which is often where the tourism departments are funded or located. So phoned up the municipality in that little community we were going through and asked about the campground. And they said, oh, wow, you know, we were coming at kind of an unusual time of year, just before closing, actually, in the fall. And so she asked, what are you doing here in our community? So I told her about the tour. Well, she took on this role of becoming an incredible advocate for our project. She connected us with restaurants. She connected us with the schools that we could speak at. She arranged the media for us. She also reached out to the business sector to see if there was interest to having us come in to present. Another example, probably my two favorite examples of community champions, were in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada, and Medicine Hat in Alberta, Canada. Again, we phoned at the tourism department, and in Medicine Hat, Jace Anderson, who was just a rock star, he arranged our hotels. This was on a different tour, the Paws Across Canada, so we didn't have the RV. We needed to stay in hotels during this 3-week tour. Jace arranged for a couple of hotels so that we could actually try 2 different pet-friendly hotels. He arranged for restaurants to feed us while we were in the community. He actually arranged a coffee tour, which was super cool. So we went to 3 different places to try their lattes, and I kind of picked my favorite. He also worked with the community organizations like the SPCA and another rescue organization for us to go do a tour there. He basically planned and coordinated and funded the stop in his community. Isn't that incredible? That was one of the easiest stops we made, and probably one of the most powerful ones, because we had this community and Jace's contacts all rallying around our message and our tour. Kamloops did something very similar. We called up Kamloops Tourism, we called up the city of Kamloops, and again, they jumped on board to support our tour for their community. And you might be asking, well, why would they support it? For them, they were really excited for the additional media opportunities. There was a real tourism twist. Here's this tour coming through their community that could do reviews on the hotels. We could do reviews on the restaurants we visited. We could write about their community, show pictures and videos about their community on our blogs and our social media. So that's one of the things that we learned to offset that mistake about champions. Was the first call you make is to the tourism department. They are so connected to many of the resources that you will need to have in your planning. So, Callie, good morning. Good morning. Kelly says, what is required to make it all come together effectively? I'm so glad you asked that. That is a great question, because I now know the answer. I'm laughing because I thought I knew the answer when we planned our first tour, but that was one of the learning experiences. What is required to pull it all together? A couple of things here. Number one is a very clear concept of what your tour is, because you have to explain it to people over and over again. You're going to explain it to the tourism department. You're going to explain it to media. Any of the stops that you're making for your speaking and book tour, you'll be explaining the concept as you pick up the phone and try to book yourself at events. You'll have to explain the concept of it to sponsors if you want to have your tour sponsored and funded through different community grants and community organizations that want to support your tour. So a really clear concept. And one of the challenges with a tour is that there's usually many moving parts. And our Million Acts of Kindness tour is a great case study of that. There were so many moving parts. We were supporting charity. We were doing community cleanups. We were doing a number of kindness activities along the way. We were speaking at schools, colleges, workplaces. We were appearing at events, at conferences, to speak at conferences. We were doing media. The list went on. And so when you imagine trying to explain what that 6 weeks is to someone in 3 minutes, you could see people's eyes glaze over. And we had the fortunate opportunity to work with one of my friends, Carolyn Ellis, Brilliance Mastery, and she actually sponsored for us this incredible graphic. If you go onto Facebook, go on to the original Team Toby on Facebook, the original Team Toby, you'll see a graphic of what our Million Acts of Kindness graphic looked like. What Carolyn did so beautifully, she's a professional doodler. She takes concepts and puts them into a graphic image so we can look at that graphic and say, oh, I get it. That's what the Million Acts of Kindness tour is all about. And why this became so important, in back to Callie's question about how do you pull it all together, if people don't understand the concept of your tour, who it's for, why you're doing it, where they fit in, they just decide that they don't fit in. It's too hard for them to learn about it. So make sure that you have a very succinct way of explaining your tour. The other things that we did that were really powerful were videos. We did short videos, 3 minutes. I will send the links to you with the follow-up video replay for this. But we did a number of videos that explained what the tour was about. We showed people what the tour was about through video. It was so much easier for people to see it and then understand it versus read it and then understand it. So that's the first thing, Callie. We've got to have that really clear concept of what the tour is about. The second thing we have to do is have those champions. But of course, you can't find those champions until you figure out where you're going to go. I had a conversation with a couple of amazing ladies, one of who is on the webinar today. You know who you are. We were talking about length of time, and I had shared with them that I probably wouldn't do a 6-week tour again. In fact, I'm pretty certain I wouldn't do a 6-week tour again. I might do 3 2-week tours. I might do 6 1-week tours, but I wouldn't do a 6-week tour like we did this time because it was long and we ran into all those challenges that I talked about at the beginning of this webinar. So you have to have a tour route and recognize that your tour route might change. You might have a number of stops that you want to make, but as you get into the planning, you're finding it difficult to find champions. You're not finding sponsors or funders to support. You're not getting a lot of support from media, for example. You're not having a great degree of success getting events booked. What I would do if you run into that kind of pushback, I would just pick another stop. I would let it go and pick another stop. I learned that on my second tour. The first tour, we had some stops where we were getting that. It wasn't resistance. It was just that some of the pieces that we needed in that recipe for success were missing. And it was sort of this uphill battle, but yet I persisted. I know some of you can relate to this, right? We're going to get it. We're going to make it work. And it was just resistance. And probably what I should have done is just said, you know what? This isn't the best stop for us. We're going to pick another community. So that's what I would do. Another part of pulling it all together, making it come together, as Callie asked, I would also say you need a team. It is very difficult to plan a tour on your own. So have advisors, trusted colleagues, people that you really respect and appreciate their feedback. Phone them and ask for 20 minutes of their time to bounce off an idea, to share an idea about a tour that you're working on, and to see what feedback they might have. because some of our best ideas actually came from people who had never done a tour in their life, but they were able to visualize something that we hadn't even thought of. So make sure that you've got a team. I actually had a team. I had Julie, the amazing Julie Angeletti, who was full-time with our company at that time, and she did much of the planning. Without her genius and her skills to coordinate things, to reach out and contact companies and organizations, to connect with tourism departments, to take care of all those details, we probably would have had a much more difficult trip, because Julie is exceptional in details. That's not my genius. So we probably would have showed up to communities if it was left to me, and I wouldn't have a place to park the RV, or we might not have had media, because Julie's genius is really all the details and putting it all together. So you need that team. The team could be people you hire, virtual assistants, VAs. It might be people that you bring on as marketing interns. We've done that before. It might be people who love you and want to support you, that volunteer some time to assist you. But you need a team. Planning a tour is too big for one person to do. The other piece, Callie, you asked about what's needed to pull it all together. You've got to have great documentation. I became a fan of Google Docs, and I used G Drive for everything. We had so many spreadsheets at one point. We had, the spreadsheet of the schedule. Then we had the spreadsheet of the media contacts. Then we had a spreadsheet of all the people that we were phoning to explore getting speaking engagements at schools or at businesses. Then we had a spreadsheet of all our sponsors and what we were committing to with our sponsors. We had a spreadsheet of everyone who was funding us on this tour. And it became so big that we had to find ways to better cross-reference these spreadsheets and amalgamate them. And so we actually created what we called the daily itinerary. So for each day of the tour, this became a very, very long document, but we